Okay, I think we're going to get started so we get you guys out of here and off to lunch on time. So first of all, thank you for coming. Good morning. I really appreciate it. My name is Josh Heller. I'm a senior product manager on the Windows Server team. And today we're here to talk about what we're doing with DirectAccess in Windows Server 2012, which is really exciting because up until like 6 o'clock this morning, these slides said Windows Server 8. So I'm really excited to say that we finally renamed the product. So let me do a quick sort of demographic check. How many of you guys are familiar with DirectAccess, just here to sort of figure out what we're doing new? Awesome. All right, keep your hands up. Of everybody that raised their hands, how many of you guys have, keep your hands up if you have deployed DirectAccess in your org? There's some different hands, which is interesting. How many of you guys have sort of fully deployed DirectAccess in your org? Everybody's using it. It's your production remote access solution. Wow, this is actually really cool. Very, very exciting. Of those people, how many of you guys would say that it's like the best deployment experience you've ever gone through, that it's super easy, that everybody should just do it? All right. The requisite laughter. Awesome. So this is going to be fun. Okay. So hopefully you guys have at least seen some of the things we've put out there around Windows Server 2012. And I'm just going to apologize now. My head has been split between the Windows Server 8 and Windows Server 2012 name for a while. So I'm going to flip back and forth as we go. So my apologies up front for that. But trust me, when I say Windows Server 8, it's replaceable with Windows Server 2012. It's just my brain not working quite as well as it should be this morning. Anyway, hopefully you guys have seen some of the information we've put out there about Windows Server 8, Windows Server 2012. I hope that what you've seen from that is we focused on sort of a few key areas. You know, lots and lots of new features, but we've tried to sort of roll them up through a handful of key, development points. And one of those is a better management experience, a better deployment experience. And this is one of those areas where I feel like we've done a really good job with DirectAccess. As you see us talk about Windows Server 2012 over the next, months and, up until we get into the release, like Brad said yesterday, is going to be later this year. You're going to see tons of information from us talking about things like Hyper-V and the private cloud, and you're going to see great new features around the storage world, like storage spaces. And I think it's really important, though, to still talk about those features that are super, super, super great upgrades, like DirectAccess, even though you might not hear us talk about them quite as much. So what we're here to do this morning is to talk about DirectAccess, how we've implemented it at Windows Server 2012. I'm going to show you some demos of sort of the new experience. And we're going to look at the experience both from the perspective of the client as well as the server. So, through your user's eyes as well as through your eyes as the IT pro. I'll try to be pretty crisp and clear as we go through this on, what's required for what. What requires a Windows 8 DirectAccess server, what is actually requiring a Windows 8 client, because there are some of these features we'll talk about that do require Win 8 clients. But, we'll have some fun. I'll try to leave some time at the end for questions, and let's do it. So, DirectAccess, and since most of the hands went up in the room, I know that this isn't necessarily new information for you guys, but I think it's sort of worth repeating because a lot of you guys, if you've seen DirectAccess presentations in previous tech eds or MMSs, this is going to be, you probably have seen the slide before, but I'm really excited that I think we're holding true to this slide a little bit better. We've always said that DirectAccess is more than remote access. And I'm going to go ahead and finish this build because I think that point on the bottom is probably the single most important thing you can remember about DirectAccess when you talk about it with your colleagues, with your management. VPNs are all about connecting the user to the network. I'm a remote user. I need to access my resources. How can I do that? DirectAccess is different. DirectAccess is actually about extending the network to the end user. And it seems like a pretty small differentiation, but it's actually really important. Your job as IT pros has to do a lot with actually managing those remote endpoints. VPNs don't necessarily help with this, the idea of managing all those remote users that are out in the field. DirectAccess is really about sort of bringing those remote users into the fold, helping you manage those users as though they were just additional nodes in the network, which with DirectAccess they really are. We'll talk at the end a little bit about sort of this comprehensive view of what we've done and what's new in Win 8, but you'll notice that we tend to focus around 4 areas, an always-on experience. In other words, users don't have to decide to VPN in. They don't have to remember that. It's just an experience that's there. The service is responsible for figuring out, am I on the corporate network or am I at a remote location on the internet? It's about managing out. So you don't have to worry about having to force clients to remember, hey, you know what? I need to check in with my management infrastructure. The management infrastructure knows when those clients come online. It's about access policies and integrating DirectAccess with things like network access protection, being able to do things like health checks, remediation, quarantine, and then finally, and this is sort of one of those things that seems obvious, but protect the transactions. If we offer these users a remote experience, we're bringing them in from the edge, we have to make sure that we're doing that securely over an encrypted, secure connection. At the end of the day, direct access is fundamentally about three key technologies. It's name resolution. In other words, how do, once we know where it is, how do we know how do we look it up? How do we know where it is? And we do that with things like DNS and NRPT. And with all the hands that went up, I'm assuming you guys are fairly familiar, so I'm not going into a lot of the technical foundation details of direct access. I'm happy to talk about that stuff afterwards. I'm also the guy, I've talked to a lot of you guys, that's standing in the Windows Server 2012 identity and access booth, so come find me there too. We need a transport. In other words, how do we actually connect those people? And we've done that using IPv6, which I would probably say is one of the scarier parts of direct access. And I think that our focus on IPv6 and how we've positioned IPv6 as a requirement of direct access is one of those things that's probably kept a lot of you that lowered your hands when I asked, have you deployed it? I'm guessing, has anybody sort of stayed away from direct access because of the v6 requirement? Yeah, I don't blame you. Look, v6 is, I've got a long background in networking. v6 can be a scary technology if you don't understand it, or if your organization, I'd actually say if your organization doesn't understand it. But we've done a lot of work in DA for Win Server 2012 to actually help mitigate that. IPv6 is still definitely there, but we've made it a fairly transparent part of it. And then finally, IPsec. And this is pretty straightforward, right? We need a way, once we have that name resolution, once we have the network connectivity, how do we actually secure the bits going across the pipe? And we do that over IPsec. So specific, though, to Win Server 8, we focused our improvements in a few different areas. So first of all, and we're going to look at each of these. First of all is client experience. The client experience for direct access in the Win 7 era was sort of a double-edged sword. It was great and beautiful because it was transparent. The problem is that it was almost too transparent sometimes. It was great because your users didn't have another application or a UI to have to remember to click on and say initiate connection or start connection, which was good for the end users. It almost sometimes became more of a challenge because there's this extra thing in between your users and the corporate network, and there was no good way, really, to sort of see, what's the issue? Where's the holdup? So what we tried to do is embrace the Win 8 design and actually build in what I think is a very seamless UI for direct access into Win 8. Deployment and management. I'm guessing that most of you who laughed at the end are probably laughing about this part. Deploying and managing DA has not been one of the better experiences we've offered, and I'll say that right now. This is probably the single area of the most focus for Win 8, is how do we make it a better experience for you guys as IT pros to deploy and manage direct access. We'll sort of get to this, but sort of the headline I'd put behind this is we've pretty much removed nearly every situation where you need UAG for direct access. So is that a good thing? OK, cool. Awesome. OK. Next area is multi-site topology. This is really cool. So now we've added the ability not just to have multiple direct access servers in a single site, but now we've given you the ability to add direct access servers all over the world. And for certain clients, and when I say certain clients, it's generally code for Win 8. For Win 8 clients, we've actually built the intelligence into the client so the client can self-select the best multi-site location in which to enter the network. And again, all this is done natively within direct access. And then finally, a ton of improvements around performance, reliability, and scale. And like I said, we're going to talk about all these individually as we go. Sound good? Cool. So an overview of the client experience. So I mentioned this earlier. Windows 8 includes an inbox interface for DA clients. The idea is twofold. One is to give you guys as IT pros the tools you need to help users help themselves. So there is a UI. There's also full PowerShell support behind the UI to help you help your end users troubleshoot. But we've also made sure to spend some time on giving the users a really simple interface that they can almost self-identify problems. And we'll take a look at a couple of those examples. We also tried to make it simple for the users to remediate certain problems within the direct access UI. So rather than kicking them off to third-party UIs or additional Microsoft UIs, we're trying to solve as much of this within the network charms as possible. And then finally, making it really easy, and for anybody who's seen the network connectivity assistant stuff, it's a lot of this, making it really easy for users to send customized logs off to the help desk. So giving you guys the ability to customize the logs and then giving the users a simple method to then roll up those logs and kick them off to the help desk for problem resolution. So a few different things, a few different screenshots we'll sort of talk about this is the UI, and we'll actually look at this live so you'll see this. How many of you guys have actually looked at Windows 8 Consumer Preview? OK, lots of people. Good. So this shouldn't be super brand new for people. So if you've ever clicked on, if you're in the traditional desktop and you click on the network icon down on the system tray, you'll see that little charms bar pop up on the side. This is what this is coming from. It's just a screen cap of that. We're doing a few different things around just helping users understand why direct access isn't working. If it's working, it says connected, and that's pretty much all you need to know. However, if it's not working, we try to tell the user why. So we flag certain issues. We flag issues if there's problems with the credentials. So in other words, if you need to put in your smart card, we'll tell users the credentials are needed, insert your smart card. We tell users if there's a problem around posture. So if there's a network access protection issue, we will tell them that it's a network access issue. We also now support proxy authentication. So proxy auth is now supported and notifiable within the client. And honestly, even things as simple as lack of internet access. It's fine if we can tell you through the traditional physical network connection that there's no internet access, but why not also tell the user within the direct access section of the network charms that there's no internet access. So again, it's just trying to make it easier for the users to self-identify issues. So here's I'm going to just go through a couple different screenshots because I can't simulate all these different scenarios within the demo. But here's a couple examples. So first of all, we're basically showing that direct access is configured. In this case, we're actually saying that we're connected either locally to a domain or through a VPN. So again, this is that area of direct access where we're detecting that we're already connected within the network, that there's no need to establish a DA connection. But again, we're telling the user that direct access exists, which is important, but telling them that it's not running right now. And I mentioned simple diagnosis of connectivity issues. So if the direct access server isn't responding, we're going to tell the user that. The direct access server isn't responding. Because for a savvy user, they may be able to do some troubleshooting their own. At the very least, if they make a help desk call, this gives the help desk a place to start as far as problem resolution goes. Within the client experience, we've also offered a lot of ability to customize the UI. So we can offer a customized support email address. So if the user encounters an issue, we can give them an email address. You guys can give them an email address to use. We're offering a friendly name, so you guys can customize the name of the entry that gets deployed through group policy so that it's understandable to the user. It doesn't have to be Microsoft Direct Access. It can be Contoso Organization Direct Access, which sort of it helps personalize the experience to the end users or your users so that they kind of understand what's going on. We allow, as an administrative option, the ability for the users to override multi-site selection. That probably doesn't make sense to people since multi-site's a little new, but we're going to look at what that actually looks like. And we also allow the users to manually disconnect. Okay? This is an example of the expanded direct access properties tool. So within that network charms, you have the ability to look at the properties, and we'll do this. You have the ability to look at the properties of a direct access connection. It's accessible through the network's UI or that network's charm. It's going to reiterate the status of remediation that you saw within the charms bar. We copy that over. I mentioned earlier that we offer the ability for the users to self-select in a multi-site scenario. This is an example of that where we're going to show them their current site. In other words, we're going to show them how they're currently connected, but give them the drop-down with an option to manually choose how to connect or which site to connect through. We'll explain a little bit later how we go through the process of multi-site selection, but this offers an ability if you want to bypass that. And then I mentioned the log collector. This is a really simple way for the users to collect the logs and then email those logs off. Log collection, this is pretty straightforward, but basically when we do those logs, these are really, really simple HTML files. This isn't like a zipped up binary that nobody can open except for Microsoft or through some specialized tool that we give you guys. These are HTML files that are basically wrapped up and bundled so that you guys can very easily open these up and diagnose issues as you see them. Within the client experience, I mentioned PowerShell support. We'll look a little bit more at additional PowerShell support, but a few different things I wanted to point out specifically. Lots of different settings to be configured. I mentioned some of them on the earlier page, things like the name of the connection, things like support email. This is another sort of snapshot. There's a whole set of PowerShell commandlets that get deployed to the remote client, that are part of the Win8 desktop experience. This is an example of one of them where you can actually see a PowerShell output of what the client experience settings are. These client experience settings are actually derived from the group policy. So this is just a quick snapshot, but it's going to show things like the friendly name. It's going to show things like the tunnel endpoints. And it's one more tool in the bag that you guys have as you're working with your end users to figure out why direct access isn't working. So again, it's focusing a lot on usability. How do we make it easier to use and easier to deploy? So let's take a look at what the client experience actually looks like. I'm doing this on a non-widescreen computer, so we'll see how well this behaves. All right, so we're going to look at client 1. This is my client 1 machine. So first thing we're going to do is down on the charms bar, I mentioned that we've got, actually, let me step back for a second. I want to sort of show you the topology we're working with. This is important. This looks like a really complex topology just to show you client UI. The reason this looks complex is we're going to come back to this over and over and over again. This is kind of our standard demo topology, if you will, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit at the end about this demo environment specifically, because this is a demo environment that very easily you guys can actually go home and deploy today if you want to. But basically what we're going to look at is client 1 on the left-hand side is within a simulated home network that is hanging off the internet behind a NAT device. We're going to connect over a simulated internet connection into my Contoso corporation, which in this example is actually composed of 2 different sites, a Washington, D.C. site and a site in France. What we're looking at basically is an example of my client. My client is connecting by default to Edge 1, which is my DirectAccess server. It's worth pointing out, just real quickly, Edge 1, Edge 2, and 2-Edge 1 are DirectAccess servers with 2 interfaces. We have an interface on the internet, and we have an interface within the CorpNet. There is no UAG in this example. So everything we go through today is using native DirectAccess, Active Directory, and Win8 clients. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a look. So we'll flip back to the client. So on the client page, I'm going to go ahead and select the network charm. And you see, I'm going to scroll up a little bit, we've got this Contoso DirectAccess on the side. You'll notice really quickly, even though it's a little bit abbreviated, that this is a customized name. Certainly we're not going to push down a name of something called Contoso DirectAccess. If I want to, I can right-click on that, and I can actually look at the properties. Within the properties, it's going to tell me a couple things. First of all, it's going to tell me that I'm connected remotely. So here you can basically tell that this is a successful connection. So there's no issues to remediate. The status is very clear. I'm connected. Okay? I'm also getting to see my current site, and I mentioned that I've got the option in a multi-point environment to actually manually select a secondary site if I so choose. We're going to look at multi-site in a little bit, but for now, we're just going to go ahead and leave this alone. I do want to show one other thing. And that's basically, again, it's sort of to give you guys a lay of the land as we move into some of the more complex demos. I'm going to go ahead and open up a browser, and what I've done is I've configured the home pages in this browser to basically point at 2 different application servers. In this example, I'm basically pointing at an application server for App 1. App 1 is within my Washington, D.C. site. You can see that it says Washington. And you'll notice that it also, I've just got it showing a couple things, because as we start to move through the high availability and the multi-site stuff, you'll start to see these IPs shifting around. You'll see that my IP is set to 1:1000 as the prefix. As we flip through, you'll see that change a little bit, but I'll try to call that out. And then we've also got a secondary site, which is France. It's showing that I'm going to France, but I'm arriving through that Washington entry point. So an example just to sort of prove at the beginning that DirectAccess is working. Okay? So we'll go back to the demo environment in a few minutes, but now we're going to take a break, and we're actually going to talk about deploying and managing DirectAccess. So I mentioned in the beginning, I think our deployment opportunity to improve was significant in Windows Server 8, and I feel like we really met that bar. This is one of those features in Windows 8 that I'm incredibly proud of, that we delivered, what I consider several magnitudes better experience over what we, gave you guys in Windows 2008 R2 and Win 7. One thing in particular, and this is actually what we'll take a look at in the demo, is what we're calling our express setup topology. How many of you guys were in the keynote this morning? Cool, lots of people. So towards the end, Bill Anderson demoed the VDI experience, the 3-click VDI experience. Those 3-click experiences are not just in VDI. We've actually built in these, we're kind of nicknaming the 3-click experiences throughout Windows Server 8. There's a lot of those features that at one point required hundreds of pages of cookbooks to sort of deploy these features. And for the large organizations that have incredibly complex topologies, there's a place for that. I don't deny that. At the same time, for a lot of your organizations, the default setup is what you guys are going to do anyway. So why go through 400 pages of cookbook? And we can give you that within a deployment wizard. And that's essentially what we've done for DirectAccess. We'll actually click through it. It might be more than 3 clicks. It's like 4 clicks, but we'll take a look in a second. A couple of things to know about that. PKI is optional. You do not have to have a fully deployed PKI infrastructure to deploy Express Setup. For small organizations, this is huge because it's very possible that they don't have standalone PKI. No machine certificates are required. We'll do self-signed SSL certs. It's based on a curb proxy, and I'll sort of show you what that workflow looks like. I don't know if they're here. Somebody grabbed me at the booth the other day and was asking me if this Express Setup stuff required Windows 8 domain controllers. The answer is no. I've verified that. This definitely works with 2008 R2. We all checked, and we're not positive it works with Windows 2003, but don't run Windows 2003. Please upgrade. It's based on a single IPsec tunnel, no IP management required, single factor auth only. So there are some restrictions. We are definitely targeting this towards a simpler organization that's got a more straightforward need for remote access. And it does require Windows 8 clients. So this Express Setup topology that we're going to talk about, or that we're going to actually demo, does require Win8 clients. So a quick example of how this actually works. We have this Kerberos proxy that's basically how we facilitate this Express Setup. And again, I'm sort of vastly simplifying what I've got in our demo environment, which is a relatively complex topology. It's multi-site. For other demos, I've actually got it set up to do like one-time password authentication. So it's a fairly complex deployment. I've got PKI deployed. But in this scenario, we're looking at this as a relatively small standalone organization, maybe single site, don't have previously deployed PKI, and luckily enough, they're all Win8 clients. So what they're going to do, they're going to bring up a Win8 client that's running DirectAccess. That DirectAccess client is going to build out a secure channel to the Kerberos proxy server, which is the DirectAccess server. Once it's built that, through that secure channel, it's going to do an AS request and a TGS request message to the Kerb proxy server. At that point, it's then going to proxy those messages forward to the domain controller. So you do have to have, obviously, you have to have Active Directory deployed, and the DA server has to be a domain member in this scenario. And then a down level or Win8 DC is going to process those messages and then basically return the status to the DA proxy server. And then finally, the server is going to send the message back to the client. Assuming all is well, the connection is going to be established, and that user is now actively using DirectAccess in this express setup mode. And like I said, I'll show you how I actually do the express setup. It's shockingly simple. As somebody who's deployed other versions of DirectAccess, I think you guys will love it. Like I mentioned, there is a requirement. The Win8 client is an absolute requirement. And you have to have an SSL cert on the DA server, but that's already provided through IP-HTTPS. Of course, we've also done, I also want to talk for a second about the advanced and down-level configurations, because we're realists. We know that, the organizations we work with, we want to make DirectAccess the best remote access solution, not just for the small organizations, medium organizations, but for the world's biggest enterprises, as well as the recognition that as much as we love it, not all you guys are going to deploy Win8 immediately. So for all of you who have lots of Win7 deployed, we want to make sure that we can also offer you a great DA experience for those down-level clients. The advanced configuration, which is basically what we're using in the demonstration, does require PKI. It does use a double IPsec tunnel configuration. We do support single-factor, two-factor, and cert auth. That's not super surprising. We support Win8 clients and Windows 7 clients, also not surprising. And it's what's required for multi-sites. There's no ability within the Express Setup Wizard to do multi-site deployments. So to do multi-site, you're required to do the advanced configuration. This is a slide that you guys have probably seen before, but I think it's, I'm sorry, did you have a question? We're going to talk about how we do multi-site for Win7. The answer is sort of, kind of, but not really. But we'll talk about that. Yeah, it's a strange answer, but we will talk about that, I promise. Non-Windows clients, yeah. So every time I do a DA discussion, there are a certain set of questions that I get. And it's funny because I'm also doing a discussion tomorrow morning on dynamic access control that I really hope you guys come to. But anyway, so all speakers, no matter what they tell you, always have a set of questions they expect to get. This is one of those that if I didn't get this question, I'd be shocked. We don't currently in the Windows 8 timeframe have plans to build out direct access clients for non-Win7 or non-Win8 clients. I won't ever say anything's impossible, but at the time that in the timeframe we're talking about right now, we have no plans to release Win7, non-Win7 or 8 clients. Okay. But we hear the message loud and clear. We know you guys want it, so we're always thinking, right? So from a deployment and management perspective, I mentioned that I wanted to talk a little bit about this shift around IPv6. Fundamentally, not much has changed. The difference is that the fundamental ability for us to offer direct access in non-native IPv6 environments was based around translation technology, and that translation technology was generally housed on the UAG servers. I mentioned that everything I'm going to show you today removes the need for UAG. What we've done is essentially migrated the translation technologies directly onto the DA Edge server experience in Windows Server 8. So I've gotten a handful of questions at the booth, and I figured out why. Barry up in front here has been working the identity booth with me, and we keep getting these questions around, like, I keep hearing IPv6 isn't needed anymore for direct access. And it's not exactly true, and I figured out why they're saying that, and at the end of the day, IPv6 is required. What's not required is configuration and any plan to move to IPv6. So you still have to have the ability to support IPv6 translation technology, but the good news is we do it all for you. So this is a quick picture. DirectAccess uses IPv6. Nothing has changed there. What's happened, though, is we're sort of making this recognition that even though we and most of the rest of the technology industry and many of you guys in your organizations recognize there's a need to move to IPv6, it's going to take a really long time, and we know that. What we don't want to do is build a technology that's dependent on this fairly monumental shift in technology. So instead, we are relying very heavily on translation technology. So within the DirectAccess server itself, we're natively supporting DNS64 and NAT64 for all of your translation needs. This is a quick example of sort of 3 different scenarios. One is, and it might be a little bit hard to see, that client on the top, on the left-hand side, is basically connecting over native IPv6. So there are a handful of people out there, a couple of really large ISPs, especially internationally, are pushing their clients to native IPv6. When they're doing that, of course, we fully support that on the DirectAccess Edge server. Also recognize, though, that most of the clients, the vast majority of clients out on the internet, are going to be coming into the DirectAccess server over IPv4. In those cases, we're using transition technologies. The same thing's true on the internal side as well. We've got 3 different hosts, and what we're basically saying is that we support hosts running native IPv6, we support hosts running transition technologies like ISOTAP, and we also support hosts that are only running IPv4. In the demo examples that I've been showing you, there's one of the servers we can actually take a look at is actually only running IPv4. So what I'm showing you is an experience where we're using IPv6 for an end-to-end connectivity, but the server itself has no knowledge of IPv6. We're doing this purely through translation. Yeah?
Does that imply that you finally talked to Windows Server 2003 boxes?
Yes. Correct. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, does that imply that we can now natively connect to Windows 2003 boxes? And the answer is yes, because we support NAT64. So using that, yes. So I want to sort of reiterate. I think one of the there's certain statements we make every time we talk to customers, and one of those things we always said was IPv6 isn't required to be deployed inside the network, but we'd really like you to have a plan to get there. We're kind of changing that a little bit, and we feel that we've architected DirectAccess in Windows Server 2012 to really remove the need for you to even have a plan to move to IPv6. Now, that's the DirectAccess statement. As a network engineer in a prior life, I'd really encourage you to be thinking about IPv6 anyway, but we're not going to require for DirectAccess. And finally, and this is going to sort of go back to one of those commonalities around Windows Server 2012. Deployment and management. If it's in the GUI, it's in PowerShell. This is a statement that I'm making about DirectAccess. The cool thing is we're making this statement about almost everything in Windows Server 2012. This is pretty much a requirement. If you're going to ship a feature in Windows Server 2012, it's got to have full PowerShell support. In many cases, the GUIs that you guys will use are actually running on top of PowerShell. This is a quick example of if you want to go ahead and install RemoteAccess, which is the role where DirectAccess lives. If you want to install RemoteAccess on a Windows 2012 server, it's basically one command really. Do add Windows feature RemoteAccess, and that'll get RemoteAccess installed. And then there's a full suite of commandlets that you can see doing get command module, and the module name, of course, is RemoteAccess, that you can see to configure DirectAccess seamlessly, just like you would within the GUI. Highly encourage you guys to take a look at the PowerShell side of this. PowerShell is super, super awesome, and it's great for DA right now. All right. Another thing I want to mention is the off-premises domain join experience. So this is really, really cool. What we've done is basically we're building in the ability for you to completely domain join and offer direct access to clients that will never touch the corporate network. The way that this works is on a domain member, you're basically going to run this command, and you guys will have all these slides. You can download them after the fact, so you don't have to write all this stuff down. But basically, this is a command that's basically going to let you issue a djoin with some parameters, and the parameters have to include the DirectAccess GPO. But once you call out that policy name, it's going to basically save that in a blob. In this case, it's a text file. And you're going to save it for reuse. And once that blob exists, you're going to use that blob to somehow distribute it to a remote user. That could be over email. Presumably, they've got some sort of web-based access to email. So you're going to distribute that blob, and then a remote user can basically, on their machine, execute this new command, which is doing the djoin and basically loading that blob file back. What that's going to do is not only join the domain, but it's going to load the direct access policy at the same time. So now what you're basically seeing is the ability for remote clients to join the network, and there's no need to ever have them on CorpNet for bootstrapping. Okay? So let's look at the easy server deployment, yeah? All right, so we're going to move away from that demo topology a little bit. I mentioned earlier that almost all the demos are going to use that same topology. This one's not because it's one of the simpler ones. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up one of my other Edge servers. This one's not been configured yet. Okay. So here we are. This is the Remote Access Manager tool. So I launched this through Server Manager. And again, everything that I'm doing here, you guys have the ability to do through PowerShell. PowerShell is awesome, but unless you're in a PowerShell session, it doesn't make for the best demo, so we're going to go ahead and do this graphically. You'll notice there's two options. I've got the ability to run a Get Started wizard or run the Remote Access Setup wizard. This is basically code for the top one's the easy 3 or 4 click setup, and the bottom one is the more complex setup. So the bottom one is basically the advanced setup, more than 4 clicks. So we're going to go ahead and do this run Get Started wizard. It's going to ask us, do we want to deploy direct access and the VPN, or just DA, or just the VPN? For the example today, and for the sake of time, we're just going to deploy direct access. It's going to go through. It's going to check some prerequisites. It's going to make sure it can contact the domain controller. It's going to double check, some basic things so that it can do some validation. And then we get a choice. We can decide how do we actually want to go through and deploy the server. This is interesting. We'll get to the end, sort of this big snapshot of features. And one of the ones I don't think spend a lot of time talking about, but I think is actually really interesting, is we now fully support the ability to deploy DirectAccess server behind a NAT device. We haven't been able to do that before. That's really cool. In this example, though, we are actually going to leverage the DirectAccess server as an edge device. So I need to go ahead and type in the name that I'm going to use for clients to connect to this. And we're going to call it demo-edge1. Oops. We might have a demo glitch, guys. Let's fix this. So, weird. Well, it wouldn't be a show if I didn't have an issue, right? Oh. All right, tell you what, we're going to come back to this demo at the end. I can't talk and type at the same time. So we're going to go through this whole thing, and then at the end, we'll sort of go back, assuming I have time. What I can do, though, is promise you this is actually a 3 or 4 click setup, because basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Edge. I'm going to go ahead and pick the public name. It's going to ask me if I want to do a self-signed cert or choose an existing cert, and then it's going to go through and actually deploy the policy. The policy takes about, on my machine, which is kind of slow, about 3 minutes to go through. At that point, you basically just have to go onto the device, do your GP updates, and then you're going to get all the information that you need. All right, so we will come back to this, I promise. All right. So let's talk next about multi-site and how the multi-site topology works. So this is kind of interesting. You know, not many organizations are a single site in one place, especially the bigger ones. How many of you guys are working in an organization that's got sites that are geographically dispersed, multiple internet access points, and whatnot? All right, a bunch of you guys, cool. All right. So we now support the ability to do multi-site deployment of DirectAccess. Where this gets really interesting is we are actually supporting integrated management and monitoring. So even though you can have multiple sites geographically spread out all over the place, we can actually roll up status and monitoring for all of those sites into a single site console, which is really kind of nice. You're basically governing DirectAccess as a technology across your organization, regardless of where those DirectAccess servers are deployed, in-site or in multiple sites. We do that for operational status. For client access, you can actually see the status of clients all over all of your different sites. And then finally, configuration deployment. So you can actually identify issues on the DirectAccess edge servers all over the world. Win8 clients automatically select the closest entry points. I'll sort of walk you through how that decision gets made in a second. Win7 clients are configured with a dedicated entry point. And this is sort of to your question you asked earlier about, does Win7 support multi-site? Win7 doesn't support the ability to do dynamic multi-site. What we can do, though, is create multiple group policies and associate Win7 clients to different group policies. So we can do multi-site, but we have a static affinity where the Win7 clients are going to be set more or less statically to a single DA site. There's no ability within the Win7 client today for us to be able to do a multi-site, a true multi-site automatic affinity deployment. And we also have the ability to do DFS share redirection to the right AD site. So a couple things from a deployment consideration standpoint. Forest and domains. So we support fully deploying those multi-site entry points in multiple AD domains and multiple forests. We're not requiring single AD domains. We're not even requiring single forest. This works in multi-forest setups. The examples that we're going through here are actually configured for single forest, but we've got 2 different domains. So that's sort of a variation of that. The DirectAccess admin has to have admin privileges for all those entry points. It's super important. And the GPO choice is customizable. We do use certificates for multi-site. That's a requirement. And for remote client traffic, we tunnel it through Trado and IP-HTTPS. If the client uses v6, the tunnel is going to be IP-HTTPS v6. Okay? So a little bit from a topology overview and like a topology flow. The way that this works, you have an admin UI, which I'll show you in a second. That admin UI is built on top of PowerShell, and the PowerShell is responsible for going ahead and building out those GPOs and then pushing them down to servers and also the client GPOs. What happens then is the client GPOs obviously get pushed down to clients. The server GPOs get pushed to the servers in Site A and Site B, because remember, the administrative experience, even in multi-site, is as though you're managing a single deployment. So from a single deployment, you're managing many, many sites. The next thing that's going to happen is all those DA servers, again, irrespective of the site that they live in, are all going to roll up data into that single admin console. I said we'd look a little bit at how clients make multi-site decisions. Basically what happens is for a Win8 client that's configured for multi-site, that Win8 client is basically going to come up and it's going to do a probe to all of the different sites that it's configured with. So in the little example that I've got up here, we have 3 sites. We have a Baltimore site, a Charlotte site, and a Seattle site. That Win8 client, when it comes up, it's going to quickly do a probe, and it's going to look at things like response time. And it's going to automatically choose the response time that's the closest. In this case, it should be choosing Charlotte because Charlotte's coming back with 90 milliseconds. It's looking at a stable corp connection. It will reprobe if there's no corp connectivity on a network change. And I think that's 1 minute, I think, is the default. And Win7, like I said, we do have to force Win7 with a single entry point. We can, however, use external global server load balancers. GSLB works a little bit different. We'll talk about that in just a second. But basically, to do multi-site, we don't actually require GSLB. It's probe-based, so the policy basically distributes the different sites involved. But we do support GSLB. Speaking of which, if you're using GSLB for the client entry points, it's pretty interesting. Basically, what happens is you're going to pick a single load balancer, a fully qualified domain name, and that fully qualified domain name is what's going to be put into the configuration of DirectAccess that gets pushed out via GPO to all the clients. What's going to happen is the client's going to come up, and it's basically going to try to resolve that FQDN. When it gets that FQDN back, the GSLB has some sort of an algorithm, depending on what GSLB you use and how it's configured, for determining what site to sort of send it to. What happens is when it sends it back, in this case, again, because Charlotte in this example was the lowest response time, that GSLB is going to say, you know what, I want you to go to the Charlotte load balancer IP address, and it's going to kick that off into the Charlotte site. So let's take a look, and this is we'll do this a little bit extended. We're going to look at network load balancing within a single site. We're also going to look at multi-site deployments, and I'm also going to give you sort of a quick walkthrough of sort of what the remote access management experience looks like. And we'll cross our fingers this demo actually works. All right, so what we've got here is my remote access console, my remote access management console. You'll notice a couple things. So we've got configuration, we've got a dashboard and operation status, and I'll sort of show you, I'll do like a quick walkthrough of how this console is laid out. So within the operation status, this is your really simple red light, green light solution to sort of see what's running, what's not running. Red's obviously bad, but in this case, you can see that for this particular edge server, which is edge 1, and if you remember back to my original demo, I'll flip back to sort of show you what we're going to do as I start to fail things. But basically, I've got one site that has 2 direct access servers on the edge, and I've got a second site that has a single direct access server. So I'm running in both network load balance mode as well as multi-site mode, and I'm going to show you failures around all 3. I can see that for each of those servers. Remember, even though I'm running in a multi-site mode and I'm sitting on edge 1, I can actually go to the 2 edge 1 within the single management console, and I can actually see the service status within there and see that everything's working. I can also look at remote client status, and you can actually see here that client 1, which was here, so I'm on the wrong server. I can actually look at edge 1, and I can actually see that my client 1 is connected to the server. I can actually double click on it, and I get some information about that client. So I can see things like what it's actually doing. In other words, this one's not doing anything right now, so it's pretty much dead. It's tunneling over IP HTTPS. I can see its IP information. Remember, I mentioned earlier that when we connect to that one site, the prefix is 1:1000. And I basically just get some really good information about that client. Beyond that, I can also look at the configuration. And this is sort of a graphical representation of how things are configured. And it's nice because for somebody who doesn't really know DirectAccess all that well, it's a good way to sort of walk the user through the lay of the land, so to speak. And it sort of helps them do like a configure this in step 1, configure this in step 2, configure this in step 3. Sorry, I think I clicked the wrong guy. I'm going to look at this as an organizational view, and basically, this gives me a really simple way. First, I know I need to basically identify what remote clients am I going to be pushing direct access out to. I can do that via group. I can do that via WMyFilter. Over the internet, I'm going to then configure the next thing, which is the remote access server itself. What do I need to do in the remote access server? And this is where the meat of the configuration is going to happen. Then I have the ability to also do things like configuring infrastructure servers and application servers for end-to-end auth. But what we're actually going to look at here is we're going to flip back, and I'm going to sort of show you the topology we're dealing with, and then I'll show you what we're going to sort of fail over first. It's a little clearer. So the first thing, again, we're going to go back to the same sort of demo example that we had earlier. I've got client 1, and the first thing we're going to do is sort of reiterate the fact client 1 is connected to edge 1, and then edge 1 connects to app 1. And remember the prefix. So the prefix when I'm going that direction is 1:1000. All right? I'm going to open up client 1, which you guys saw earlier. And if you remember, I can open up Internet Explorer. and I see that I've got my 2 web pages open. I've got one open app 1 and one open app 2. It's reflecting the fact that, yep, my prefix is actually on 1:1000. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate a failure. What happens if edge 1 goes down? And basically in this scenario, I'm using network load balancing to load balance the direct access experience in site 1, which is Washington, between edge 1 and edge 2. So I'm just going to go ahead for the sake of simplicity, and I'm actually going to pause edge 1. So edge 1 is paused. Okay, we're going to flip over. I'm going to sort of show you what should happen. So the next thing that's going to happen, I've basically simulated failure of edge 1. Edge 1 goes down. I'm basically going to lose my connectivity from my client through edge 1 on app 1. So instead what's going to happen is using network load balancing, and network load balancing, of course, is configurable, but it's going to take a few seconds, 30 seconds or so to fail over. I'm going to get a new connection to edge number 2 facilitated through NLB, and that's going to connect out to app 1. So you'll notice my prefix is going to change from 1:1000 to 1:1001. And let's flip over and see if that's actually happened yet. So now I'm here at app 1. I'm going to first scroll down, and we're going to see if DirectAccess has fixed itself yet. It says it's connected. Let's see if it's actually finished failing over. And yes, and you'll notice now my prefix is now set to 1:1001. I'm still coming into that Washington entry point because I haven't actually failed the site. I've just failed that one server. And now I can actually go, and I can also see that I'm still connected to app 2, which is connected through the Washington entry point. And now what I want to do is we're going to go back and we're going to simulate one more thing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go ahead and fail edge 1. I'm sorry, I'm going to fail edge 2. So I've paused edge 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause edge 2. And now what should happen when I take edge 2 away, and this is going to take a couple extra seconds, we'll just sort of talk through this. Once I've failed edge 2, the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to have to establish a new connection. But in this case, I'm basically going to use the multi-site configuration. If I had my client set to automatically detect, which we'll go do in a second, it's going to go and actually do a lookup. And it's going to see, you know what, the only server I can actually get to right now is actually 2-edge 1. I can only get to my secondary site. So let's go ahead and see if that works. It's going to look at client 2. By rights, these should be down. Because remember, I have my site 4 selected as site 1, and of course I can't get there. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to look at my direct access properties. I'm actually going to, you know what? Let's go ahead and do an auto select. I'm going to do an apply. And of course, it'll take a couple seconds to nail the connection. We'll sort of let this happen. Should have had this set to auto detect before. Okay, we're going to give that a few seconds to go ahead and finish failing over. But what should happen, oops. So what should happen is we'll be going through 2-edge 1. So I want to see if we get this to work. Okay, and now we're actually connected remotely. So now if we go through, you'll see that we're still connecting to app 1. Our IP's changed again. Our new prefix is now 2-2000, and these are just basically the configurations I've chosen to sort of make this easy for you guys to see. What's different now is we're actually connecting to the France entry point. So in the model where I've got this automatically selected, my client's automatically going to detect a failure and fail over. In the model where I was basically force selecting to one site, I'm not going to be able to get a connection, but what will happen, though, when I set it back to auto-select, it's going to do that probe, see that it can't get to that site, and then redirect me to the appropriate site. Make sense? Cool. Do we support sticky sessions? So your client's going to basically, I think it's every 8 hours. By default, your client's going to reevaluate every 8 hours to sort of see if the site that it's currently using is still the best site to use. So it's not sticky in terms of like load balancer stickiness, but it is sticky from like an affinity perspective. Once we have a client, we don't continuously reprobe. I think the default's 8 hours. So every 8 hours we'll do a reprobe. And if we've got a better client experience somewhere else, we'll automatically transition to that new one. Okay? Does that answer your question? Okay. All right. So a couple of the things I want to talk about, and yeah.
So is this failover pointless if you have a Windows 7 client?
So the way that Windows 7 works, no, not really. So basically, for high availability in a Windows 7 world, you're going to want to basically use network load balancing. We don't have the ability to do multi-site level failover in Windows 7, because Windows 7, when you go through the wizard, it's going to go into the multi-site wizard, it's basically going to ask you to classify your Windows 7 clients, because what will happen is you'll end up with a separate GPO. So you push one GPO to your Win 8 clients that supports true, automatically chosen sites for multi-site. But for Win 7, you're basically going to have to choose an affinity for your Win 7 clients. And that can be done based on their typical geography, but there's no way to make Win 7 auto-detect multiple sites. Instead, you would use something like multiple DA servers in a single site using NLB. That's how you would do high availability in the Win 7 world. Yeah? I couldn't hear the very end of it. Can you say it a little louder? There are no plans that I know of to rebuild the DA experience down level in Win 7. So no. So the features like being able to use easy site deployment or easy DA deployment and the ability to do multi-site is only going to be Win 8 and later. We don't have plans to backport that functionality to Win 7. There's a couple of things I want to talk about is around performance, reliability, and scale. So how many of you, do any of you guys consider yourselves to have like, tens of thousands of users plus on a DirectAccess deployment? Really big, heavy, thick DirectAccess deployments? Okay. So scaling DirectAccess hasn't always been the easiest thing to do. Yeah, okay, you're shaking your head. Good. So we've done a few different things to try to make that experience a little bit better. The first thing we've done is implemented receive-side scaling. So we now support RSS using UDP for DirectAccess. This is a quick task manager snapshot of what that looks like. This is an example of a relatively loaded server, relatively loaded DirectAccess server, showing 4 cores, probably 4 hyper-threaded cores. And basically what's happening is we're getting this really distributed CPU load where you've got one core not doing anything and you've got one core just getting worked. And that's because receive-side scaling doesn't exist in the Windows 7, 2008, or 2 era. However, in Windows 8, when we do have RSS support, you'll notice that similar load, but running on Windows Server 8 with DirectAccess, we're basically getting even load across all 4 cores, which should, at the end of the day, translate to a much higher density from a client perspective. A couple things to know about that. So SRIOV is necessary. So if you want to do RSS within a DirectAccess server running as a virtual machine, and of course we fully support DA running as a VM, all the demo stuff we're doing is running as VMs, obviously, you do have to have SRIOV enabled. So if you're not super familiar with SRIOV and how that works with Hyper-V and Windows Server 8, I'm happy to chat with you guys separately about it. We're also, for anybody going to TechEd, doing lots of stuff at TechEd around like how SRIOV works. But basically, you do need a NIC capable of SRIOV if you're going to be running RSS in a VM for DA. IP-HTTPS performance is basically at parity now with Trado. So we've removed the need to do double encryption when you're using IP-HTTPS, and we've removed duplicate address detection. So what you'll notice is IP-HTTPS performance is pretty awesome now. A couple of things from a security scale. So we support IPsec hardware acceleration within a VM now. IPsec capabilities are now advertised by the hypervisor to the guest OS. So basically, the guest OS now has an understanding of the underlying hardware from an IPsec acceleration standpoint. This is enabled using a PowerShell command. Again, you guys will get these slides, so you can rip these commands out later. And you can also do offload hardware adapters with team NICs, which is kind of cool. So I don't know if any of you guys have seen this or not, but we now support native NIC teaming out of the box in Windows Server 2012. So no need for third-party NIC vendor LBFO drivers anymore. NIC teaming out of the box with mixed vendors, which is super cool. We support that now for offloaded hardware as well in DA. One of the things I wanted to mention, the other thing is I didn't put it up on the slide because I think we're going to come out with hopefully better numbers later. We're basically almost showing an 8-time improvement in density. So if you had an R2 server that was comfortably, I'm just going to throw out like a number, like comfortably running 100 DA clients, you, depending on configuration with lots of asterisks after it, because we're still working on pre-release code right now, you could expect to see upwards of 800 clients. So we're looking at 8 times improvements. And of course, now that UAG is out of the picture, you don't have to worry about performance scalability for UAG either. We're just looking at DA scalability. So hopefully some really nice performance improvements for folks like you that have had some problems with performance and density. Hopefully that's been solved. I'm sorry, what's that? I don't know of a number that we've capped it at. I can find out. I'll write it down, and if you come find me at the booth later today or tomorrow, I'll find out for you. I don't think there is an actual cap number, but I'm not positive. I'll find out. As far as this is sort of this summary slide, I know we still have some time left. I want to go back and try to do that easy demo. But basically, I want to talk a little bit about just some other stuff that we're doing. This is sort of an overall picture of here's everything new and improved. The stuff in bold is pretty much the stuff that's really new. So really nice PowerShell-based administration. Rich monitoring of clients, the unified management wizards. Sometimes we get a bad rap for wizards. I think that if you guys look at the wizards we're delivering within Windows Server 8, I think you guys will actually be really excited. Not just DirectAccess, but a lot of these other tools. We've really tried to take a look at what are the typical deployments that our customers use, not just pick like stupid random defaults, but actually make intelligent choices to make it easier for you guys to get these services deployed. I mentioned the Express Setup Wizard, which we're going to try to go back and see. It says V6 isn't required, and what I'd sort of amend that to say is a plan to migrate to V6 isn't required. What we're saying is we've got a great translation technology built into the product now, so we don't feel like you have to have this big, comprehensive plan to move. One-time password and virtual smart card support. So for anybody that's been reading about things like Win8 security, you'll note that we've enabled virtual smart cards within Windows 8. We now support virtual smart cards as an authentication method. I'm actually using it internally right now, and it's incredibly nice not to have to use a smart card. Deploying multiple entry points. We talked about multi-site. I hope you guys really think the multi-site stuff is neat. We've actually extended the multi-site stuff a little more, and there's not time today to really sort of go into this in detail, but we've extended the multi-site to even move into these site-to-site models, where you can actually now use the DirectAccess technology to connect multiple sites around the world together. I think we're going to have a session at TechEd that goes into site-to-site VPNs, but this is now the ability not only to use DirectAccess remote client connectivity, but also to use DirectAccess technology for site-to-site connectivity. So basically building out those site-to-site tunnels. Significant scale increase. Again, we're saying in the area of about 8 times. Pre-release. The hope is we can always even do better than this, but you'll see probably better performance numbers as we get closer to release. And I also mentioned we can now do deployments where you're behind NAT on the server side, which is pretty nice as well. So yeah, you have to shout really loudly or come to the microphone.
You're talking about DirectAccess. What about the managed out scenario?
What was I heard the direct access part. What was the last part?
The managed out scenario, is it supported as well?
Manage out. Well, manage out has been supported with direct access from day one. That's kind of like the whole point of direct access is you get this ability to manage out because your clients are going to natively be on the network, just connected remotely. I guess I don't really understand the question, I guess is the...
Well, with UAG, you're using EasyTop for managing your clients within your corporate outside over the internet. And you're just showing how you can access from the internet the corporate resources.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you're basically, yeah, so you'll have the ability from the corporate, and I may not be understanding your question, I apologize, but you have the ability to sort of manage those devices. I haven't demoed that. I've basically been showing you sort of connectivity from the inside out. I'm sorry, from the outside in. But I could just as easily, if I had, as an example, if I had sharing enabled on that remote site or on that remote PC, I could just as easily manage that remote PC using something like Configuration Manager, using something like any management tool, really. If I had a web browser running that client, I could open up a web session to that client.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah. No, you now need one IP address if you're connecting it directly out to the internet edge, but I also mentioned we support basically server deployment behind a NAT device. So if you're in an organization that happens to be in a place like, especially a lot of places right now, where it's really, really hard to get public IPv4 space, you now have the ability to actually deploy that behind an existing NAT device. So if you've already got an existing NAT, we can now support deployment behind that device. I'd have to look for the full list, but it's going to basically be the IPsec bits. It's going to be the IP HTTPS port. Yeah, I'd have to get you a complete list. I don't know off the top of my head. We've got it documented, but it's a list. But yeah. Any other questions? And then I've been trying to sort of fix the demo at the same time talking to you guys, and it's slowed me down a little bit. But any other questions while I'm doing this? Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, that's a really good question. I don't have a lot prepared to talk about that. However, actually I should have said this. This is a really good plug for the website. If you go to TechNet, on TechNet there is if you go on the TechNet, there is a document out on TechNet that exactly goes through the process of converting from a Win7, Windows 2008 R2, and UAG deployment, migrating into a Windows Server 8 direct access deployment. Very pre-release. It was released as part of beta. I think we'll do a refresh as we get closer to new milestones. The other thing that's out there is the Schinders have started to do, they've got a document out on their blog on this exact same topic, basically migrating from a direct access UAG deployment to a direct access on Windows Server 8 deployment. So there's documentation out there. Tom Schinder. So if you just, yeah, isoserver.org, or if you just like Bing search Schinder UAG direct access Windows Server 8, it's like the first hit you get. And I've not actually run through their steps, but they're probably perfect. I'd be really surprised if they weren't. I have run through the steps on our TechNet website, and it's pretty good for beta level documentation. So I think that would actually do what you needed to do. All right, we're going to flip back. Sorry for anybody that's still sticking around here. So basically what I've done, I basically fixed my problem not having IP connectivity in the outside interface. My apologies for that. I've gone ahead and I've configured a public name that I'm going to connect to. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And I basically have the option, if I want to go back and actually edit the wizard settings. But you know what? I don't really want to, so I'm just going to go ahead and say Finish. And basically we're going to look down here, and I'm going to have my server basically go through. It's going to write these GPOs. This is going to happen for another few minutes. This server is like surprisingly overloaded and slow. But this is basically the process. So again, we're talking basically 3 clicks, what used to take many, many clicks with multiple pieces of software and several hundred pages worth of documentation, which was, enough to spoil anybody's day. Last thing I wanted to sort of go through, lots of Windows Server 8 topics at MMS. You can tell I'm pushing Windows Server 8 really hard because I'm not just the DirectAccess guy. I'm actually Windows Server 8 product manager. So definitely try to get to as many of the Windows Server 8 sessions as you can. We're incredibly excited about the product. A bunch of these haven't actually happened yet. So if you're at all into virtualization, go see Jeff's session this afternoon. Jeff's a beast, and he's always really, really good. And then I've got a session tomorrow morning. We're going to talk about dynamic access control. So as fundamentally different as you can get from DirectAccess, we're going to talk about some new stuff we're doing around Active Directory and authentication tomorrow morning. So we're a little early. Go enjoy lunch, but I'm happy to take questions in the meantime. Thank you.
So there was a network location very nice website.
Okay, I can't hear you. Yeah, I'm sorry, one more thing in case anybody's standing around. I mentioned at the beginning, thank you very much for the reminder, the demo that I went through, if you go onto TechNet, I mentioned that we've got the UAG migration guide. The other stuff that we've got out there, if you look at TechNet and go to the library and go under Windows Server 8, we've identified all these different scenarios that you guys can go try. One of those scenarios is actually DirectAccess, or it's remote access in general. And there's like 4 or 5 lab guides. Pretty much everything I walk through, even including like machine names, topology exactly, is basically what we've actually written up as demos. So you guys can actually go out there using the Windows Server 8 beta and Windows 8 consumer preview bits and actually try pretty much exactly what we've got. Don't be scared off. There's a lot of topology. Like, I don't know if you guys saw my Hyper-V list. There's like 12 servers in this lab because you basically have to simulate an internet, simulate a home, simulate a company. So there's domain controllers, NAT devices, routers, but all the instructions to literally start from nothing but media are out there. So thank you.